The clock struck 11 as Clara Monroe pushed open the heavy door to room 509, the quiet hum of Sterling Memorial Hospital's private wing fading behind her. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, the latter her small rebellion against the sterile perfection of billionaire care. She always brought a drop or two from home, a secret ritual she believed made the place more human. Adrian Hale lay motionless beneath crisp white sheets, machines breathing and blinking around him with mechanical loyalty. 8 months had passed since the crash that had broken every headline and half the city's heart. A self-made genius, the youngest CEO in tech history, creator of the neural mind network that changed how people communicated. And now just a pale silhouette against hospital linen. Clara set her bag down gently and checked the monitors. His pulse was steady, oxygen levels perfect, every number obediently lined up. Nothing ever changed. Yet she checked as if hope could be measured in digits. She smoothed the sheets, tucked them with practiced care, and whispered, "Good evening, Mr. Hale. It's Clara again. Another long night, huh?" She always talked to him. Some nurses thought it strange, but the silence bothered her more. Since her brother's death 2 years ago, a hit and run that left her alone in the world, she had learned to fill emptiness with words. Her voice, soft and even, was a comfort to herself as much as to the man who couldn't answer. Outside, the rain drummed against glass, steady as a heartbeat. She moved around the room, adjusting the dim lights, her reflection ghostly in the window. "I read about you again today," she said, wiping a fingerprint off the monitor. "They called you the mind of the century. Said your car just lost control on the bridge. But bridges don't just kill geniuses, do they?" She smiled faintly. "I don't believe in Exodus, ants anymore." She sat in the chair beside his bed, the one that had molded to her shape after so many nights, and took his hand gently in hers. It was warm, heavier than she expected from someone so still. "You'd probably hate this," she whispered. "Being taken care of, being watched. People like you are supposed to be untouchable. But I think you were tired before the crash. I see it in your face." His eyelashes were dark against his skin, his jaw shadowed by stubble. She had memorized every line, every freckle. The tabloids had shown him smiling, confident, surrounded by models and investors. But up close he seemed softer, almost fragile, like someone who'd been waiting too long for peace. Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out her small Bluetooth speaker. She pressed play and a quiet piano melody filled the air, something slow and melancholic. "My brother used to love this song," she said. "He said it sounded like the ocean thinking." She laughed quietly. "He was weird like that." As the music played, she began her nightly routine, checking IV lines, recording vitals, changing bandages with careful precision. Her movements were graceful, almost tender, as if every touch might coax him back from wherever he was. Sometimes she imagined he could hear her, that in the darkness of his mind her words floated like lanterns across a still lake. She didn't know that, deep within that silence, Adrian's mind flickered at the edge of awareness. Faint echoes of her voice brushed against the static. A sound, a presence, a warmth he couldn't name but clung to desperately. When the tasks were done, Clara turned off the overhead light, leaving only the monitor's glow and the gentle pulse of the heart rhythm filling the room. She began to hum, the same tune she'd hummed every night without realizing how familiar it had become to him. Her voice was low, soothing, threading, through the mechanical sounds like silk through metal. The monitors responded with a soft spike, barely noticeable, a slight quickening of pulse. Clara frowned, checking the screen. Maybe you heard that, huh?" she said with a smile that no one would see. "If you can hear me blink or something, I'll take anything." The rhythm steadied again, but she swore she saw a flutter beneath his eyelids. Her heart skipped. She leaned closer, watching, waiting. Breath held. Nothing. Maybe the light had tricked her. Still, she stayed by his side long after her shift should have ended, humming softly into the quiet room. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, The machines kept time, and deep in the hidden corridors of Adrian Hale's sleeping mind, a faint spark flickered, one that would soon ignite a storm neither of them could have imagined. Night pressed heavy against the hospital windows as Clara Monroe walked through the quiet halls toward room 509, her footsteps soft against the linoleum. The world outside was asleep, but her heart was wide awake. Something about tonight felt different, the air thicker, charged like the moment before a storm. She didn't know that inside the man she called her quiet miracle, a storm had already begun to rise. The lights were low when she entered, only the monitors pulsing blue across Adrian Hale's still form. She moved around the room with practiced grace, checking lines, adjusting the oxygen flow, whispering his name as if it were a prayer. "Adrian," she said softly, "you made it through another day. That's something, right?" Her voice trembled, but she smiled anyway. She always smiled for him. She sat beside him and began talking like she did every night about small things, the world outside, the weather, her favorite childhood stories, things that reminded her that life still existed beyond these four walls. But tonight she found herself speaking about her brother again. She told Adrian how he had died in a hit-and-run 2 years ago, how the driver was never found, how sometimes she dreamed of headlights and woke up crying she did. It noticed the faint flicker on the monitor or the almost invisible twitch in Adrian's hand. "I guess that's why I can't believe in coincidences anymore," she whispered, "because sometimes I think the person who hit him didn't just disappear. Maybe someone helped them. Maybe they were powerful enough to hide it." She looked at Adrian's sleeping face and added softly, "The same way someone powerful enough made sure nobody ever found out what really happened to you." Adrian's heart rate spiked for a second, a sharp beep breaking the silence. Clara jumped, then frowned at the screen. "Easy," she murmured, pressing her hand gently against his chest. "It's okay. I'm right here." Her voice steadied him. The monitors settled again. She didn't know that her touch had reached through the fog inside his mind, a spark of awareness burning like light under deep water. Inside the gray corridors of Adrian's mind, sound became color. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, but her voice was. Everything had echoed through the darkness, warm, clear, real. When she said his name, it felt like sunlight cutting through endless night. He didn't understand what was happening, only that he had to hold on to that voice, that heartbeat, that presence. Hours slipped away until it was nearly dawn. The rain outside turned into a whisper against the glass. Clara fought her exhaustion by reading aloud from the book she always carried, the same one she'd read every night, a collection of letters written by lovers, separated by war. Her voice cracked as she read words about waiting, about believing, even when the world says it's hopeless. She closed the book and sighed. "If you can hear me, Adrian, I hope you're fighting your way back. I don't know why, but I believe you will." Her head leaned against the mattress as sleep finally claimed her, but the room was no longer silent. The machines began to hum differently, a soft, irregular rhythm as if something deep inside. He then was responding. A shiver passed through Adrian's fingers, a faint tremor too small to notice, and then another. His chest rose with a stronger breath, the first voluntary one in months. In his mind he saw flashes, metal-twisted glass, breaking headlights, cutting through rain. The voice of a woman screaming his name. Not Clara. Another woman, cold and furious, and then silence replaced by the sound of Clara humming the tune she always did. Every night his body reacted to that sound. Heartbeat, steadying brain activity, climbing. He was following that voice home. Clara stirred in her sleep, unaware that the man she had spoken to for 8 months was beginning to wake. His fingers twitched again, the smallest movement, but enough to send a soft blip across the monitor. She lifted her head, groggy eyes blinking at the light. "Adrian," she whispered, breathless. "Did you just—" She leaned forward, heart racing, eyes locked on his still face. "Please do it again, please." The monitor pulsed steady and clear like an answer, and for the first time Clara let herself believe that her miracle might finally be waking up from the dark. The morning light spilled across room 509, turning the pale walls gold. Nurses moved quietly through the halls, but inside the room it was just Clara and the man who was no longer lost to silence. Adrian Hale's fingers twitched again, this time clearly. His eyelids fluttered like someone struggling against a dream. Clara froze, breath trapped in her chest. She leaned closer, heart hammering. "Say something," she whispered. "Please, say anything." For a long moment, there was only the steady rhythm of machines. Then his lips parted, a single sound, escaped raw and broken. "Clara," he whispered. It wasn't loud, but it carried through the air like thunder after years of drought. Clara stumbled back, eyes filling with tears. She pressed the call button, but her voice came first. He spoke. He said my name. Doctors rushed in. Alarms sounded, the calm of night replaced by chaos. The attending physician shouted orders. "Check pupils, get me neuro on call. Heart rate 96, oxygen stable." The staff surrar hounded him, but Adrian's eyes searched only for her. He found her in the corner, trembling, hand pressed to her mouth. Their eyes met for a heartbeat longer than time itself. He remembered everything. Not clearly, not in perfect sequence, but her voice had been the map that led him back. He remembered every story she told, every song she hummed, every tear she tried to hide. She didn't know it yet, but Adrian Hale had heard her for 8 long months, every night. Her words had anchored him to the world. Hours passed in a blur of medical tests and flashing lights. The hospital buzzed with reporters outside, hungry for headlines. The sleeping billionaire has awakened. But inside the private suite, the air was heavy with emotion. Adrian's mother, the sharp-faced woman who had built empires beside him, entered with practiced grace behind her. Trailed men in suits, board members, lawyers, damage control, the machinery of power returning to its master. When Clara tried to leave the room, a security guard stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, Mr. Hale is under private care now. We'll take it from here." She blinked, the words cutting deeper than she expected. "I'm his nurse," she said weakly. "I've been here since the beginning." The man didn't move. Orders came from above, but Adrian's voice broke through, hoarse but commanding. "Let her stay." Everyone turned toward the bed. His eyes were open now, sharp and impossibly focused. "Clara, stay, please." His mother's lips thinned. She stepped forward. "Adrian, darling, you're weak. You need rest. This woman doesn't belong here." Adrian looked at her with an authority that no amount of weakness could erase. "Mother, this woman saved my life, and she's not going anywhere." Silence followed, the kind of silence that shifts the air around people after they left. Clara sat beside him, unable to speak. His hand trembled as it found hers, his voice rough like gravel. "I heard you," he said. "Every night, I heard you reading. Nung. I heard you laugh. I heard you cry." I tried to answer, but I couldn't. She shook her head, tears spilling. "You couldn't have. That's not possible." He smiled faintly. "It's the only thing that kept me alive, Clara. You kept me alive." For a moment, the room held its breath, the beeping machines, the faint smell of antiseptic, the soft hum of city noise outside. All of it faded as he lifted her hand to his lips. The world thought he was a man, reborn. But she knew this was more than survival. It was connection, forged through silence, through devotion, through something that defied reason. But before the miracle could settle, a shadow returned. Adrian's doctor stepped in, holding a folder, his expression unreadable. "Adrian, we need to talk about the crash," he said softly. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not now." The doctor hesitated, then lowered his voice. "It wasn't an accident." Clara's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" The doctor looked at her, then at Adrian. "The brakes were cut. Someone wanted you dead." "Adrian." The silence that followed was electric. The man who had just escaped death turned toward the woman who had saved him and whispered, "Not everyone will be happy that I woke up." Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, a secret long buried had begun to stir. And Clara realized this miracle was only the beginning of something much darker. The next morning came with flashing cameras and whispered headlines. Adrian Hale, The man who had slept through 8 months of mystery was awake. The world called it a miracle, but inside Sterling Memorial Hospital, it felt more like a storm brewing. Behind locked doors, reporters shouted questions at every nurse, but none dared speak. Only Clara knew the truth that his awakening was more than medical. It was something no science could explain. Adrian had been moved to the top-floor private suite guarded by men in black suits, the kind that never smiled or blinked too long. His mother handled the press, his lawyers handled the money, and everyone seemed to forget the woman who had spent nights talking to him when he was more ghost than man-claw. Ara's shifts were quietly reassigned. They told her her work was done, but she couldn't leave. She felt something in her bones that told her danger was not over. When she arrived that night against orders, she found Adrian sitting up by the window, shadows cutting across his face. He turned slowly when she entered, his eyes sharper, more alive than she had ever seen. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Security has orders." Clara stepped closer. "I don't care about orders. You shouldn't be alone." He gave a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "I haven't been alone in a long time, not since you started talking to me in my sleep. I remember everything, Clara. I remember every word you said." His tone softened, but underneath it was something else. Something like fear. The crash wasn't random. Someone wanted me gone. She swallowed, the chill spreading through her chest. "I heard what the doctor said. You think someone close to you did it?" He turned away, staring at the rain outside. "I don't think I know. My company's board is fractured. Half of them want control, and my fiancé is missing in Europe since the crash. Now suddenly her lawyers are calling again, asking about my will." The word fiancé hit Clara like a quiet wound. She hadn't thought about the life he had before the coma. She had only known the version of him who couldn't leave her side. She forced a smile, professional and distant. "Maybe she's just worried about you." He turned back sharply. "No, she's worried about losing the fortune she planned to inherit. She never loved me, Clara. She loved the empire. And when I started talking about selling it to fund open source projects, she started talking about freedom." He stood too fast, wincing at the weakness in his legs. She rushed forward, steadying him, his skin warm against hers, his breath close enough for her heart to trip. "You need to rest," she said, but he didn't move away. Instead, he whispered, "You're the only person I trust. I don't want hospitals, I don't want strangers. I want you to help me recover here with me." Before she could answer, the door burst open. His mother swept in, followed by 2 lawyers, her voice cutting like glass. "Adrian, what are you thinking? You are not bringing that nurse to the estate. She's done her job." Adrian's eyes hardened. "You don't get to decide who saved my life." "Mother." Later that night, Clara stood outside the hospital watching as black cars pulled up to the entrance. Adrian's people loading medical equipment and files. He looked out through the tinted window, meeting her eyes through glass. The car door opened. He extended his hand. "Come with me, Clara, please." It should have been a fairy tale moment, the patient choosing his healer. But when she stepped into the car, she noticed the driver's eyes in the mirror, cold, unfamiliar, and watching too closely. The road stretched dark ahead, rain slashing across the windshield. She looked at Adrian and whispered, "What if waking up was the easy part?" He met her gaze, his voice low and certain. It was waking up to the truth. "That's dangerous." Behind them, the hospital lights faded ahead. The mansion waited like a shadow on the hill, and Clara realized she had just stepped out of safety and into the heart of something far more powerful than love. The mansion rose from the fog like a sleeping beast, all steel and glass and silence. Clara had never seen a place so beautiful and yet so empty. Adrian's world looked like perfection, but the deeper she stepped inside, the more she felt its chill. Every sound echoed, every light flickered too bright. There were security cameras in every corner, men in suits who never smiled, and doors that stayed locked, no matter how gently she tried the handles. Adrian guided her through the halls, his hand occasionally brushing hers, the gesture soft but charged. "This is home," he said quietly, but the way his voice broke told her it didn't feel like one. Not anymore. He moved slower than usual, though he tried to hide it. The ACC. Ident had left its shadow in his body, the limp slight but real. She helped him to his study and he sank into a leather chair, staring out at the storm clouds gathering over the cliffs. He spoke without looking at her. Victor Crane. He said that name again. The man I trusted since college, my partner, my friend. He was supposed to be the one watching my back the night of the crash. He was also the one who convinced me to take that road alone. Clara's pulse quickened. What are you saying, Adrian? That he tried to kill you? He looked at her. Then eyes hard as obsidian. Not tried. Clara, he finished. He succeeded. The person who walked away from that wreck isn't the same man who drove into it. And I think someone made sure I never would be. She wanted to tell him he was imagining it, trauma, maybe paranoia, but something in his voice stopped her. This wasn't fear. It was certainty. Still, she whispered. Why would he do that? Adrian leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. Because I was about to expose him. He had been laundering money through shell companies using my name and my systems. I found out the night before the crash. I told him I was going public, and by morning my brakes had failed. Thunder cracked above the mansion. Clara shivered. He reached into the drawer, pulling out a small silver flash drive. He tossed it to her. This is everything I found before it happened. If something happens to me, you get this to the police? She blinked, confused. Why me? Because I trust you, he said simply. And then softer, because you already saved my life once. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall, someone approaching. Adrian's eyes flicked to the security monitor, flashing red on his desk. His voice dropped. Stay quiet. The door opened and a tall woman stepped in, dripping elegance and danger. Isabel crossed the missing fiancé. Her eyes glided over Clara before settling on Adrian Darling. She purred. You look better than I expected. Death seems to have done wonders for your complexion. Adrian's jaw tightened. What are you doing here? She smiled, a predator's smile, checking on you. The world believes you're still recovering, but the board needs your signature, or perhaps you've already given it to your new nurse. She let the word linger, slicing through the air. Clara straightened, feeling the insult sting, but before she could speak, Adrian said calmly, Isabel, this is Clara Monroe, the woman who kept me alive while you were gone. Isabel's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold. How touching. I see you've replaced me faster than expected. Adrian rose from his chair, wincing slightly. I replaced nothing. You left before I even crashed. She laughed, a low, sharp sound. Careful what you say, Adrian. I can still destroy you. Her heels clicked against marble as she turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, her voice soft and venomous. Some people should have stayed asleep. Adrian, when the door closed, Clara realized she was shaking. Adrian moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't let her get to you, he said. But the faint tremor in his hand betrayed his fear. She's dangerous, Clara whispered. And she knows something. He nodded. I know. And we're going to find out what. That night, she couldn't sleep. She wandered through the halls of the mansion, drawn to the faint hum of servers behind a locked steel door. One panel of glass glowed faint blue behind it. Rows of machines running lines of code labeled Hale Labs Project Phoenix. She didn't understand what it meant, but she knew one thing. The truth Adrian was chasing wasn't just about betrayal. It was something bigger, something hidden deep enough that someone had already tried once to silence him forever. As lightning split the sky over the cliffs, Clara turned back toward the dark halls and whispered to herself, if I'm going to save him again, this time it won't be from sleep. It'll be from the people waiting for him to fall the next morning. The storm had passed, but the air around the Hale mansion still felt heavy with secrets. Adrian's mother had left early for a press meeting, and Isabel was nowhere to be found. Clara found herself standing on the terrace watching the waves crash against the rocks below the ocean. Looked violent, endless, and she wondered if that was what Adrian carried inside him. A storm that never really stopped. He joined her quietly, moving with the careful steps of a man rebuilding his strength. The wind caught his hair, his shirt loose against his frame. For a moment, he didn't look like the man in every magazine. He looked human, fragile, real. I barely slept, he said, his voice rough. Every time I close my eyes. I see the crash, headlights, glass water. I feel the spin. He stopped and turned to her. I hear your voice, Clara calling me back. She wanted to speak, but couldn't. The truth of it, too, raw. Instead, she placed her hand on his arm, a simple gesture, steadying both of them. His eyes darkened with something she couldn't name, but it burned slow and deep between them. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and for a second the world fell away until a voice from the doorway shattered it. Well, isn't this touching? Isabel stood there perfect as ever in black silk, her expression all venom beneath the smile. Sorry to interrupt your morning romance, she said. But we need to talk, Adrian. He stiffened. What do you want, Isabel? She stepped forward, heels clicking on the marble. I want what's mine. The company, the house, the life you built while I stood beside you. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You were supposed to die, Adrian, she whispered. Clara froze, every word sinking like ice. Then she smiled sweetly. But since you didn't, I suppose I'll have to settle for ruining you instead. She turned and left, leaving a silence that screamed behind her. Adrian's hands clenched, shaking. She's bluffing, Clara said softly, trying to believe it herself. No, he whispered, she's warning me. Later that night, Clara found Adrian in his study, the lights low, the screens around him filled with lines of encrypted data. He was trying to trace bank records to link Isabel and Victor Crane to the crash. His fingers moved fast across the keyboard, but his breath came shallow. You need to rest, she urged. I can't, he said. Not until I finish this. He paused, eyes flicking to a security feed on the corner screen. The image showed a car pulling up to the gates, headlights off. That's not my staff, he whispered. They moved quickly. Clara grabbed his arm as the lights in the mansion flickered. Security alarms went off. Footsteps echoed below. Adrian opened a drawer, pulling out the flash drive from before. Take this, Clara. If they find it, they'll kill you for it. Go. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you again. He looked at her, then really looked, and something fierce crossed his face. Then we go together. They slipped through the service corridor as dark figures entered through the main doors, guns glinting under flashlights. The sound of shouting filled the hall. Adrian guided her down a narrow stairway toward the hidden garage, but halfway through they heard another voice, deep and calm. Victor, Crane himself, standing at the top of the stairs. You should have stayed dead. Adrian? Adrian froze for a heartbeat, then pulled Clara behind him. Go, he whispered. She refused. No, we face this together. Victor descended slowly, smiling at the sight of them, his voice smooth like oil. I see you brought your little nurse. How poetic you fall in love with the woman who watched you rot. Rage flashed across Adrian's face. You tried to kill me because you couldn't steal what I built. Victor laughed. No, I tried to kill you because you started dreaming too small. You wanted truth. I wanted power, and power always wins. Before he could move, a shot rang out. Glass shattered. Victor fell back, clutching his arm. Clara stared in shock. Anne held the gun steady, his hand trembling, but his aim perfect. Security guards rushed in seconds later, drawn by the noise. Victor was dragged away, shouting curses. The moment passed, but the weight of it hung in the air. When the chaos ended, Adrian dropped the gun, his breath shaking. Clara stepped forward and caught him before he could fall. His voice broke against her shoulder. I almost became like him. Clara, I almost lost everything. She held him tighter, you didn't, she whispered. You found something worth saving. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, washing the world in pale gold. The danger wasn't over, but for the first time, Clara felt something stronger than fear. She looked up at the man who had once been lost in silence and whispered, We're not done yet. Are we? Adrian smiled faintly. No, he said. The truth is still out there, and this time we're finding it together. Rain returned that night, soaking the city in silver. The Hale mansion stood quiet but not peaceful after Victor Crane's arrest. The news exploded across networks, calling it the fall of a corporate empire. But Clara knew better. It wasn't over. It was only the beginning. Adrian had enemies with power and money, and the kind of darkness that didn't stop when someone went to prison. She found him in the conservatory, hours before dawn, surrounded by glass walls and dying orchids. His face pale, his eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He didn't look like the billionaire the world worshipped. He looked like a man hunted. "They'll come after you again," she said softly, not looking away from him. Adrian nodded. "I know. Victor was only a piece of it. He wasn't the one who cut the brakes." Clara froze. "Then who was?" Adrian's hand tightened on the edge of the table. "Someone who knows everything about me. Someone inside the house." He turned toward her. "There's something else the drive you're holding. It's not just about money. It's about Project Phoenix." Her heart skipped. "What is that?" He hesitated, then whispered, "A neural mapping program I created years ago. It could rewrite memory. If used wrong, it could control people. Victor wanted it. Isabel wanted to sell it, and my mother helped them both." The words hit her like thunder. "Your mother?" she gasped. Adrian's voice broke. "She signed the contracts, Clara. It was her signature, not mine. I was too sick to see it before the crash, but now it all makes sense." Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed through the mansion, followed by shouting. Adrian turned toward the door. "Get behind me," he said, but she grabbed his arm. "Adrian, you can barely stand." He ignored her, pulling open the drawer of his desk and retrieving the same gun from the night before. "Stay close." They moved through the hallway, lights flickering, the storm outside roaring louder. Each second, security was gone. No guards, no staff. The power cut. Just the echo of footsteps moving toward them. Slow, deliberate. Adrian raised the gun, but a voice stopped him. "Put that down, son." It was his mother. Elizabeth Hale stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, her eyes calm, almost cold. The betrayal in her voice was sharper than any weapon. "You should have stayed asleep. Adrian, you weren't supposed to wake up." Her words cut the air. Clara felt her blood freeze. Adrian whispered, "You signed my death. You and Victor." His mother smiled sadly. "It was supposed to be painless. The world was already moving without you. You would have destroyed everything, your company, your legacy. You killed your own son." Adrian said quietly, his voice breaking. "I protected him." She snapped the boy. "I died the day he started questioning his inheritance. I saved the name Hale from scandal." Clara stepped between them, her voice shaking. "You call this saving? You tried to murder him for profit." Elizabeth's eyes flicked toward her with contempt. "And who are you? The nurse, the charity case who thinks love changes anything?" Adrian's voice turned into steel. "Love is the only thing that saved me, Mother. You can't destroy it." Again he stepped forward, but she raised her hand, a small black remote, flashing red. She pressed it, and alarms screamed through the mansion. Security shutters began to fall, trapping them inside. Adrian pulled Clara behind him. "Run!" he shouted. But the door ahead sealed shut. She looked at him, panic rising. "What now?" He grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the lower corridor. The basement. The sound of machinery filled the hall. Heavy metal doors closing one by one. Adrian typed codes into a panel, his voice steady but desperate. "She's triggering lockdown. If we don't get out now, we'll be buried here." They reached the last door. He slammed the emergency override and it hissed open, revealing a narrow tunnel leading to the cliffside. Wind howled through it. Behind them, Elizabeth's voice echoed from the speaker system. "You can't run forever. Adrian, the world will believe whatever I tell them." He stopped for a heartbeat, staring up at the ceiling, his voice low and fierce maybe. "But they'll believe the truth when they see me alive." They ran through the tunnel light from the storm flickering ahead just as they reached the exit. An explosion ripped through the hallway, throwing them to the ground. Heat fire dust. Clara coughed, choking on smoke. Adrian pulled her up his arm, bleeding. She tried to speak, but he just said, "Keep moving. Don't stop." They stumbled out onto the cliffs, rain slashing against them, lightning splitting the sky, the mansion behind them burning like Judgment Day. Clara turned to look back, the empire of glass collapsing into fire. Adrian held her close. his voice raw. It's gone. Everything. My past. My company. My name. She touched his face through the rain, then whispered, Maybe that's how you start over. Maybe you were never meant to be saved. You were meant to be reborn. Adrian looked at her eyes full of something stronger than pain, and for the first time since the crash, he smiled. Not the mask, the world knew, but something real, something alive. Behind them, the mansion burned ahead. The road disappeared into darkness. They didn't know where it would lead, only that they would walk it together and that somewhere beyond the storm, the truth was still waiting. The next morning, the world woke to chaos. The Hale empire was gone. The mansion destroyed the media, flooded screens with flames. Headlines called it a tragic explosion, a gas leak, a mystery no one could explain. But Clara knew it wasn't an accident. Adrian and she had escaped through the cliffs that night, hiding in an abandoned coastal inn miles from the city. The sea roared outside like a witness to everything they had survived. Adrian sat near the window, wrapped in a blanket, his face pale, his body trembling from exhaustion and blood loss, but his mind sharper than ever. His laptop flickered with encrypted files pulled from the drive he had given Clara before the mansion burned Phoenix. He said quietly, the word heavy as ash, It's all here, Clara. Every transaction, every deal, every name. They used to fund the project. She leaned closer. What are you going to do with it? He looked up at her eyes, dark with resolve. I'm going to end it. Phoenix wasn't just a program, it was a weapon. Victor and my mother sold pieces of it to government contractors. Memory rewriting control through implants they planned to erase people who knew too much. She froze Adrian. This isn't just business. This is treason. He nodded slowly. That's why we can't go to the police. Not yet, we don't know who's involved. Clara pressed a hand to his arm. But someone will come for us. They won't let you expose this. He smiled faintly, then let them come. I've been running long enough. That night, she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Shadows moved across the window. Adrian was gone. Panic surged through her. She ran to the hall, calling his name, but a hand covered her mouth, dragging her back. A voice whispered, Don't scream, Clara. It's me. Adrian pulled her into the shadows, his breath ragged. There are men outside, armed, she whispered. Who? They're not from Victor's people, he said. I recognize the insignia, private military tied to Phoenix. We have to move now. They slipped out the back through the rain-soaked alley, the ocean crashing below them, headlights cut through fog, voices shouted orders. Clara's pulse raced. Adrian led her toward the cliffside path, the same one they had escaped through before. We can't keep running, she gasped. He stopped, turned to her, lightning flashing across his face. Then we fight. He pulled a small device from his coat, a portable transmitter. If I upload Phoenix's data to the open net, it'll go public. Everything they did exposed to the world. She stared at him. That will destroy everything you built. He met her gaze quietly. It was never mine to keep. It was theirs to free. Before she could respond, a gunshot cracked through the storm. The bullet tore through the rocks beside them. Clara screamed, Get down! Adrian shoved her behind a boulder, returning fire with the pistol he'd kept from the mansion. More shots echoed, men moving closer through the fog. They were surrounded. Adrian tossed her the flash drive. If something happens to me, you finish it, Clara. You promise? She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. No, I'm not losing you again. He smiled faintly. You never lost me. You found me. Remember? He stood firing again, covering her retreat, but a second shot hit his shoulder. He stumbled. Clara crawled to him, gripping his hand, blood staining her palms. Stay with me, Adrian, please, stay with me. He looked at her eyes, blazing through the pain. If we die today, at least the truth dies with us together. Then the roar of engines filled the air. A helicopter's searchlight cut through the mist, flooding the cliff with blinding white. A voice shouted through a loudspeaker. Drop your weapon, stand down, Federal Intelligence, Claire. A froze agents in black tactical gear surrounded them, guns aimed not at Adrian, but at the men chasing them. Shots erupted. Chaos, smoke, confusion. She grabbed Adrian, dragging him back from the edge as the wind howled. Hours later, she woke in a hospital bed, the air filled with the sound of machines again. But this time she wasn't alone. Adrian lay beside her on another bed, alive, his hand reaching for hers, his voice weak but steady. "We did it, Clara. It's over." She shook her head, tears falling. "It's never over." He smiled. "Maybe not, but now they know." Outside the window, cameras flashed through the rain. The world was waking to headlines that would shatter everything. Phoenix exposed the billionaire who risked everything for truth and the nurse who saved him twice. Clara looked at him, whispering, "We can't go back to who we were." He nodded. "No," he said. "But we can start again." Somewhere far away in a dark office, a woman watched the broadcast. Elizabeth Hale's face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Her voice calm as she picked up the phone. "She survived." "So did he." "What do you want me to do?" the man on the line asked. She smiled. "Finish what we started." The storm might have passed, but the war for truth had only just begun. The hospital lights flickered as night fell, the air heavy with the scent of rain and antiseptic. Clara sat by Adrian's bedside, her eyes tracing the lines of his face. He looked peaceful, but she knew better. Inside him burned the same fire that had nearly destroyed them both. Reporters crowded outside, federal agents patrolled the halls, and the world was calling him a hero. But in his gaze there was no triumph, only warning. "They think Phoenix is gone," he said quietly. "But I only released half of it." Clara frowned. "What do you mean, half?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "The other half is encrypted, stored somewhere, no one can reach. Not even the government until I'm sure it won't be used again." She stared at him, disbelief mixing with fear. "Adrian, that's dangerous. You're giving them a reason to come after you again." He smiled fum. "Inly, they already have reasons. Now at least I have control." Before she could answer, the door opened and a man in a dark suit stepped in, flashing a badge. "Agent, Keen Federal Intelligence. I need a few minutes with Mr. Hale alone." Clara hesitated, but Adrian nodded. "It's all right." She stepped into the hall, watching through the glass as the two men spoke. Keen leaned close, his face tight with authority. Adrian's expression hardened, then he shook his head. The agent left without another word, his jaw clenched as he passed. Clara whispered, "What did he want?" Adrian said, "To turn everything over, every file, every copy, and every witness." "Witness?" she repeated. "You mean me?" He nodded slowly. "They don't like witnesses, Clara. They like control." She felt her heart squeeze in her chest. "What are you going to do?" He took her hand, his voice steady. "We disappear." By dawn, they were gone. No warning. No goodbyes. The hospital room left empty except for a wilted white rose on the table. The media spun theories, kidnapping, assassination, escape, but the truth was quieter. They drove through the mountains until the city lights vanished, replaced by mist and forest. He found an old cabin owned by a friend from before the crash. There they hid together days, turning into weeks. In that quiet exile, they learned what peace could sound like: the ocean far below the cliffs, the wind through pines, his laughter returning piece by piece. But even peace had shadows. One night, while he worked by lamplight, she found him staring at the same encrypted file, Phoenix pulsing faintly on the screen. "You're still trying to unlock it?" she said. "I thought you destroyed it." He didn't look up. "I can't yet," he whispered. "There's something inside, something I didn't create." She moved closer and froze. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor, but beneath them were images, photos of faces, military officers, doctors, government seals. Her own name appeared for a C, conned and vanished. "Clara, what is this?" she whispered. Adrian's voice was hoarse. "This isn't about control anymore. It's about replacement." Phoenix wasn't designed to erase memory. It was designed to rewrite people completely. Before she could speak, the power cut out. Total darkness. The laptop snapped shut. Adrian stood, moving fast to the window, headlights in the distance, too many to be coincidence. He turned to her, his face pale. "They found us." They ran to the back door, but the forest outside was already crawling with movement, flashlights cutting through fog. A helicopter's beam swept across the clearing. Adrian grabbed her hand, whispering, "Stay close." They sprinted through the trees, mud splashing beneath their feet. Gunfire cracked behind them, shouting voices. They stumbled down a ravine, his arm around her waist, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Suddenly a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. Elizabeth Hale, her coat soaked from rain, her eyes calm as death. "I told you couldn't run forever," she said. Adrian's voice trembled. "You tried to kill me once, Mother. You failed." She smiled. "Did I?" The helicopter light hit her face, revealing something new, colder. Her eyes unfocused, a faint blue shimmer across her pupils. Clara gasped. "Adrian, that's Phoenix. She's been rewritten." Elizabeth tilted her head. "The government finished what I started, darling. Now I am what you built, perfection." The soldiers behind her moved in perfect synchronization. Silent, precise. Adrian pulled Clara behind a tree, firing twice, but they didn't even flinch. "This isn't human," he said through his teeth. "This is what Phoenix became." Clara looked at him, eyes wide. "What do we do?" he whispered. "We finish it." He threw the drive into her hands. "Run, Clara. Find the main relay tower by the cliffs. Upload everything." She shook her head. "I won't leave you." He looked at her, then his voice broke. "If they take me, they'll take it all. You're the only one left who can stop them." She ran, tears mixing with rain, the forest roaring with light and sound behind her. Adrian faced the soldiers alone as Elizabeth stepped closer, whispering it was all ways going to end this way. "My son," his voice calm even through the chaos. "Not this time, Mother. This time it ends with truth." As Clara reached the cliffs, the sky exploded with lightning. She jammed the drive into the tower port, the signal flashing red, then green. Phoenix began uploading line by line back in the woods. Adrian's voice echoed through the system. "The truth isn't meant to be owned, it's meant to be free." The data hit the airwaves in seconds, spreading across networks unstoppable as dawn broke over the ocean. Clara turned back toward the forest, but there was nothing. No sound, no trace, only smoke rising where the fight had been. She fell to her knees, whispering his name. By sunrise, the world had changed. Phoenix exposed, governments denied everything. Media called it the digital revolution. But Clara knew the truth. Adrian had given the world freedom at the cost of his own life. Or so she thought, until the screen of her phone flickered to life. A message from an unknown number appeared, 4 words glowing against the dark. "I'm still with you." 3 months later, the world had changed. Phoenix had rewritten history. Governments fell, leaders resigned, cities buzzed with fear and fascination over the program that could rewrite human minds. The name Adrian Hale had become legend. The ghost who exposed the truth and vanished into the fire. But Clara knew he wasn't dead. The message on her phone had been real every night she stared at those 4 words. "I'm still with you," searching for a sign that he was out there somewhere. She moved through New York City under a different name, working at a small community clinic where no one knew her past. But sometimes she caught strangers watching her in crowds, men in suits who looked too calm to belong. She felt it in her bones. The war wasn't over one night. As she locked the clinic door, a black car pulled to the curb. A window rolled down, revealing Agent Keene, his expression unreadable. "You're hard to find, Miss Monroe," he said softly. She froze. "How did you know I was here?" He smiled. "We always know we need to talk about Phoenix." She took a step back. "No, I'm done with that. I gave the world the truth." He shook his head. "You gave them chaos. Miss Monroe, the files you released weren't complete. There's a missing segment, the heart of Phoenix, the code that controls the rewrite sequence." Her pulse quickened. "You think I have it?" He nodded. "You or Hale, if he's alive. And something tells me you already know the answer." Before she could reply, his radio crackled, a voice sharp and panicked. "She's here, sir, on the roof." Keene looked up and muttered, "Impossible." Then everything happened at once. Gunfire shattered the night glass rained down from the building above. Clara ducked behind a car as a figure leapt from the rooftop, landing hard and rolling into the street. For a heartbeat, she thought she was dreaming. Adrian Hale stood in the middle of the road wearing a dark coat, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes alive with the same fire she remembered. Keene drew his weapon, but Adrian moved faster, disarming him with a single strike. "Don't shoot," he said. "She's with me." Clara couldn't breathe. "You're alive," he smiled faintly. "I promised, didn't I?" Keene scrambled to his feet, shouting orders, but Adrian grabbed Clara's hand. "Run!" They bolted through the alleyways, sirens wailing behind them until they burst out onto the waterfront. Breathless, soaked, and shaking, she turned to him, tears falling. "You died. I watched it." He shook his head. "They wanted you to think that Phoenix wasn't destroyed. It adapted it. Created decoys. I was one of them, but I broke free. I've been hunting the last part of the code, the one they'll use to rebuild the program." Before she could answer, lights flared across the pier. Black vans screeched to a stop, armed soldiers spilling out. Elizabeth Hale stepped from the lead car, her movements unneat. Irvingly smooth, her eyes still glowing faint blue. She looked more machine than human, now her voice calm as she spoke. "Phoenix never dies, my son. It evolves." Adrian pulled Clara behind a cargo crate, whispering, "She's the core Phoenix, uploaded her mind before the explosion. If we destroy her, the system dies with her." Clara looked at him, voice trembling. "How do we kill something that isn't human?" He pulled a small device from his coat, the last failsafe, the shutdown pulse. "It will erase every strand of Phoenix code everywhere." She stared at the blinking red light. "What happens to you if you use it?" He met her eyes. "I'm still connected to the network." "Clara, if I trigger it, I go with it." She shook her head. "No, there has to be another way." He smiled softly. "There isn't. Not this time." He stepped out from cover, calling his mother's name. "Elizabeth." Her head tilted, recognition flickering through the mechanical calm. "You can't stop evolution," she said. He raised the device. "Maybe not, but I can end the corruption." He pressed the button. A burst of white light tore through the air. The soldiers froze. The machines screamed. Sparks rained like meteors. Phoenix burned through every signal, every satellite before collapsing into silence. Clara ran to him, catching him as he fell, his body trembling, the glow fading from his eyes. "It's over," he whispered. She held him close. "Please stay, Adrian, please." He smiled faintly. "You saved me twice, Clara, once from death, once from becoming something I'm not." As dawn broke, the sky turned gold over the river. Helicopters circled the ruins of the pier, reporters shouting into cameras. The world would call it the day Phoenix died. But to Clara, it was the day she lost him for real. She closed his eyes, whispering through tears, "You gave them freedom. Now, rest." Weeks passed. The world began to heal. Governments rebuilt the name Phoenix, became legend, buried under headlines of rebirth one evening as Cly. Ara walked along the river. She noticed a drone hovering near the water. It dropped a small black cube into her hands. A hologram flickered to life. Adrian's face appeared smiling, the same quiet smile she loved. "If you're seeing this, it means the world is safe," he said. "I promised I'd stay with you, and I meant it. Look up." Clara lifted her eyes and gasped across the skyline. Giant screens lit up with a message glowing against the night. "Love cannot be rewritten." Adrian Hale. People stopped in the streets, staring at the words. Clara pressed her hand to her heart, tears shining in her eyes. The wind carried his voice one last time, not from a machine, but from memory. She whispered back, "I know." And somewhere beyond the circuits and stars, beyond fire and code and silence, the man who had once been lost to sleep watched over her, the final guardian of a world reborn.